Hello bee people, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About Bees. My name is Humberto and today we're gonna be talking about honey. I'm pretty sure you take honey for granted, but there's a lot more to it than you might think, so stay tuned. Okay guys, so first of all let's talk about the bees that are capable of producing honey. If you remember from last episode, there's around 20,000 species of bees around the world, but not all of them are capable of producing honey. The bees that are actually capable of producing honey is just a few hundred species around the world. The main one that you know are honeybees. But there are also some bees on the Apis genus that are capable of producing honey for human consumption. The other bees that are capable of producing honey are the stingless bees. And these bees produce honey on a different fashion to honeybees, but these bees don't store honey on a regular honeycomb. They store the honey on honey pots. And this honey is quite different from the honey that you know. This honey is very acidic because these bees ferment this honey for its preservation. So that's a different honey. Now talking about honeys, there's actually two types of major honeys. The first one is honeydew, and I have a pot here. This honeydew is quite different from the regular honey because it doesn't come from flowers. We're gonna talk about this later on. But this honey comes from insects, not flowers, insects. These insects are called aphids. These aphids is a very small insect that go into the bark of the tree and suck the sap of it. Now, the dejections of this insect is quite sweet and is very attractive to honeybees. So the honeybees go there to the insects and suck the dejections of this insect. And they carry it to the hive and make the same process as the regular honey, which is dehydration, and convert it into a type of honey. But the chemical characteristics of this honey is different from the other one because the sugar composition is different. If you guys want to know more about that, just let me know in the comments and I'll make sure to make a video about it. So this honey is quite different. The honeydew is quite different from the regular honey. Depending on which tree are these aphids feeding on. So the general characteristics of this honey is going to be different from the regular honey and depending on which tree are these aphids feeding on. Now the second type of honey is the regular honey that you might know. But talking about those honeys, there's quite a few differences between honeys. Not all honeys are made the same. First of all, we have to consider that honey does come from flowers. There's some structures in the flower called nectaries. The nectaries on the flower secrete nectar that is very attractive to honeybees. But nectar is different from honey. And it is different because basically it has a lot of water. Basically 80% of the nectar is water. And the sugar that it has is sucrose, which is the same sugar that you find on table sugar. So when the bees take the nectar to the hive, they process it to convert it in honey. And the process that it undergoes is a dehydration process where it loses pretty much all of its water. So if you remember, in the nectar, basically it's 80% water, but when the honey is ripe, the honey has probably around 20% of water. Now the sugar also is different because the bees add to it, to the nectar, add an enzyme that converts that sucrose into two types of sugar, simple sugars, which is fructose and glucose. Now that conversion of the sugar and the dehydration process makes the honey the honey. Now there are also different types of honey. First of all, we have to consider the floral source. If the honey comes from a single flower source, it's what is called monofloral honey. And depending on the type of flower that it comes from, it can be very clear or it can be very dark. So for example, an orange blossom honey could be very clear and very runny. But on the other side, for example, a buckwheat honey, it can be very dark and very thick. Now there can be also honeys that come from many flower sources at the same time. For example, here in the tropics, the bees collect the nectar from many types of flowers, and it makes a honey that is multifloral because it comes from different flower sources. Now you might find that some honeys are very prone to crystallization. If you see this honey here, this honey is crystallized. It's not a bad honey, it's just a honey that underwent a chemical process which is called crystallization. Crystallization is just a natural process of the honey that has to do with the floral source, the temperature, and other factors like the glucose to fructose ratio. So considering that, there are honeys that can crystallize quite quickly, and other honeys that probably a year can go by and the honey is just starting to crystallize. It just has to do with the floral source. It doesn't make it a better or worse honey. You might also have heard about the creamed honey. Creamed honey is not a different type of honey. It's just a regular honey that went a crystallization process, but a very fine one. So the size of the crystals are very, very small, so it feels like a butter. So depending on the floral source, the honey can have some properties that are called biological properties, and that depends on the substances that are diluted on the honey. So these properties can give the honey some health benefits as well. So for example, there's in New Zealand, there's the Manuka honey. It's a very well-known honey because it has a substance that is very well known for having some antibiotic properties. So also the flavor of the honey can vary from type of honey to type of honey. And there are some people that have preference for one or other type of honey. Okay guys, so that's an overview about the honeys. If you have any questions or comments, just make sure to put it on the comment section below. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of the future videos. So see you next week.